We're kicking off today by showcasing the power of plus at work over time in another and a very different locale, about 500 miles north of us. Link Learning is also part of a renaissance underway in the city of Oakland. The Oakland Unified School District, Oakland employers, Oakland political leadership, and the Oakland community and young people are aligned and are advocating for pathways to college and career success for all students. And we are absolutely, and I personally am absolutely thrilled to have the leaders who are making it happen here with us today to share their story. So I'm going to make my way over to this talk show stage. And while I'm doing that, please help me in welcoming a remarkable visionary to join me on stage. Please greet Dr. Kyla Johnson-Trammell, the superintendent of Oakland Unified School District. I think you're here. We're going to do a little dance. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for being with us today. It's so nice to see you and to have a chance to have you help us share the story of what's happening in Oakland. And I have heard you speak, and you as a leader say, if anybody's expecting that it's me doing everything, you're looking in the wrong direction. This is a community. Can you speak a little bit about that in terms of the work and what you're trying to lead in the school district with all of the partners that you have? That would be great.
Absolutely. I'm a huge believer of the old adage that it takes a village to raise a child. And I do think that Link Learning, and we all know, everyone here, that it's not a program, and it's more an approach to learning. And our tagline in Oakland is that by the time we want our students leaving our system, we want them to be ready for college and to be ready to graduate from college for the world of work, and to really be active, globally conscious citizens, so to really be civically engaged. And so to do that, that allows kids to really have the opportunities to succeed, and we can't do that alone as a school system. And so what the Link Learning approach allows us to do is to have a way for multiple systems to work together to hold all students. So school districts, community-based organizations, corporations, and other universities and colleges. And it sounds easy to say, and everyone in this room knows how hard it is for multiple systems to work together in terms of the same vision. And that's really the work that we've been involved in for many, many years. And what that does is it allows access and equity to flourish in schools because it gets away from the notion that one teacher and one principal can do everything for all students. It's an enormous task that takes an enormous amount of not only resources, but love, relationships. And so really the approach allows the system for kids to have multiple relationships and connections. If the classroom isn't doing it for them to be able to see the power of math or English in whatever the work-based learning experience is, to be able to have that connection through the internship. So it really is a way of really bringing together multiple systems, having everyone focused on a vision, and everyone to really see really the growth of students over a particular year or multiple years. So that's really the work we've been about.
And so you talk often, music to all of our ears, right? Students first, right? Equity. And there are a lot of ways in which people talk about that in different approaches, different models, as you know, right? Why has this taken hold in Oakland as a vision for how we move a whole community forward, right? What do you think is it because just by the very nature of what it is that we have to have partnerships, or how has Link Learning sort of taken root for the long term there, right?
Well, I think back to the systems piece, it's really challenging for multiple systems to work together. And so I think the approach allows the different puzzle pieces to come together, and for different agencies and systems to be able to have a way and kind of like a center focus to be able to work with students. So for example, whether it's dual enrollment classes, that creates kind of like the connection for the university, the community college to work with teachers and allows kind of partnership and collaboration with students. The internship experience, it provides kind of a way for those puzzle pieces to come together to actually kind of motivate relationships between students, between educators in the schools and educators in the community. And I think the fact that you've got multiple folks touching kids directly is the do different. Because when people can actually see, it's hard to stay motivated to do something that's great in concept when you really can't see any change on the ground, right? And the fact that you can see that light bulb change with the kid, you can see the press more when they're in the classroom, and you see them thinking differently about their life. You're able to develop a relationship that's beyond that year. That, I think, is what keeps people coming back and getting more motivated to figure out not only what to do to help the school district and the students, but what more can they do within their own field.
Exactly. So I want to take a sense for you. Tell me the range of partnerships that are at play here, because when you go to Oakland, it's a network of activity, connections. Yes. Everybody kind of knows what their role is, not their place, their role, like everybody moving forward. So give people a flavor of the kind of partnerships this work has invigorated.
Yeah, in Oakland, we'd say they're hella partnerships. We've got a lot of them, a lot of them. Yep. So I think everything ranging from our mayor is very involved. So we've developed this partnership through Oakland Promise, which really helps with counseling. We have our local hospitals that are involved. We have different health agencies that are involved, different community-based organizations that are involved, and many different universities that are involved, as well as a lot of our philanthropic partners. Mm-hmm. So it's never ending.
So I want to take a pause exactly on that note. And we're going to give everybody a flavor by video of an incredible partnership that has developed in Oakland. And it was a partnership that developed with philanthropy, with strong leadership, and very strong employer-led work with the district. So I'm going to take a pause and let you watch the video.
Oakland Health Pathways Partnership, bringing together Alameda Health System, the Alameda County Health Pathway Partnership, and Oakland Unified School District to provide young people with hands-on experiences in healthcare settings, emphasizing rigorous academics, new technical skills, work-based learning opportunities, and comprehensive student supports. The Oakland Health Pathways Partnership supports young people and strengthens our community. Together, we are helping Oakland students thrive in school and envision a bright future.
These programs have benefited me by giving me a super raw experience while still supporting me in every way that I need.
What I like about being in the Community Health Pathway at Skyline is that it focuses on health-related professions.
It actually motivated me to pursue what I wanted to do.
I want to go into a health profession, so it's a great way to start in high school.
It's given me this insight into what it's really like to work at a public hospital, and on top of that, a public hospital in my community.
We put students in the space to see what the work is like. They are in the lab, they are in the emergency room, they are in the clinics. They really get to see what it's like to be a care provider on the front lines of that care.
Link Learning has had a great impact on our students here in Skyline. It's helped us to prepare our students for college and career, for community, and for life as well.
The self-motivation, the hope, and the confidence, I frankly feel is developed when they are out of the classroom and in the workplace.
There's really a dire need for us to do high school differently, both in terms of what we teach, but also how we support kids.
As soon as we expose the young people to mentors and careers, their trajectory immediately change.
What we're seeing already is an increase in graduation rates and attendance rates and a decrease in suspension rates.
This will help Oakland in the long run. Some of them begin to see where they can excel, what career area that they can see themselves going into.
This program impacts the community at large on multiple levels.
We know that there's so much more we can do, and we know that there's so many others out there who don't get that experience and don't get that exposure, and we could help them with that.
So if all the students had the same opportunity and did programs like this, Oakland would be a lot better. I feel like the violence would be down.
This program actually gets you to interact with different students in Oakland, knowing like different backgrounds and actually learning together. I felt like it was more like a second family to me.
It is so vitally important to expand the pool of healthcare workers, both in number and diversity. Here in the East Bay, we actually have a shortage of healthcare workers, and so we have an opportunity to work with our community to address disparities.
We are the beginning of changing the way medicine is, and I think that we're taking this first step right now. Yeah, we're students of color. This is the future of medicine.
By allowing the students to shine, to be something more than just another number or statistic, you're allowing us to show the world that we have potential. This program really changed my life.
As I said, it's a shining example of the kind of partnerships that we're talking about. And to help continue our conversation, I want to welcome to the stage Delvecchio Finley, the CEO of the Alameda Health System, to join the conversation. I'll move that out of your way. Good morning.
Morning.
So one of the
Is this on or is it already on? How does it?
I think it's on. I think you're good. I think everybody's hearing you.
This is really neat.
Yeah. Well, you know what's really neat is what I want you to share with everybody in the room, and Kyla, join in too. One of the biggest, I think, questions that educators, and over 10 years or 12 years of doing this work, I still have, right, is how do we get employers really involved with this work at scale, right? And you have done that. You've made a commitment to doing that. So share with everybody, what is the motivation? How does this solve a problem that you have, right? How do we think about engaging employers in a way that makes it sense to them?
Sure. So first off, I want to take a page out of Dr. Trammell's book and say that this is by far not about me. It's actually, our work has ramped up since 2015 when I joined the system, but the genesis of this work actually started before I got there. So I feel fortunate to actually be able to carry it forward, but also with a great team, Jessica Pitt and others who are here who really helped to carry that vision forward. So I want to say that first of all, those are your partners in the industry who are really helping Alameda Health System to live out our role in the community in partnership with our educators and others to make this happen. So the why, as an employer, I think is, for us, particularly in the healthcare space, we're becoming increasingly aware of this notion of how to address social determinants of health. There's this concept that so much of what predicts and determines your health status happens outside of the healthcare space. So we can develop the best hospitals, the best emergency rooms, the best clinics to take care of people when they engage us. But about 80% of what happens that determines your health or social determinants of health are in your community. And those are things like, do you have access to great education? Do you have safe neighborhoods? Do you have neighborhoods where you can actually exercise and have other personal fitness, safety, all those sorts of things, and jobs. Access to resources to make sure that you're able to provide for your family healthy foods and other sorts of things. And so for us as a system, we have become increasingly aware of this notion that if we don't make investments upstream, if we don't figure out how to espouse what we call being an anchor institution, making sure that the resources are getting to the community as much as possible, then we're actually doing a disservice, and we won't be able to solve it at this back end. We can, again, the dollars or the cost of caring for people at the so we call bleeding edge is so much more expensive when it happens there versus if you're able to get upstream and support people in ways that provides for more continuity and for more stability. So for us, it's not just a sort of a social a good. In fact, it is that, but it's much more than that. It's a business imperative for us to meet the needs that our community has of us and ones that we want to deliver for them.
So how do you, people often say educators and employers don't really speak the same language, right? So that there has to be a translator sometime. You all are involved together in building a pipeline of educated, engaged young people. How are you doing that? Talk to each other about what are the ways it's easy and what sometimes is hard?
Well, I think some of it is learning how to be bilingual. School districts, we have to learn the language of other kind of sectors and vice versa. And a lot of it starts with, it really is relationships and lots of communication and really being clear about the why and learning from mistakes. I mean, this is really grounded in continuous improvement because even something, what sounds simple, like having a really thoughtful internship experience for students. There's lots of bumps on the road to really figure out what's that quality experience. To build those relationships with kids, I think a lot of times we think people are born being able to do that. That's a skill. Sometimes we find on the work side that there's support needed in terms of how you connect with kids. You know, the frequency, what's the role of the teacher, what's the role of the school versus the employer. So the communication, having opportunities to reflect, and really getting clear on understanding both roles, right? It's not about always the school system saying, thou shalt do this, and it's not about the employer saying, if you just fix this, we would get what we need, right? And we know, just like a marriage, you know, it takes a while to get that rhythm right. So the persistence, really sticking with it, and that communication is just critical.
I completely agree. I would say that for me, it looks like it's a continuum. So there are kind of on both polar ends, if you will, a little bit more sort of fidelity to the expectations that both entities have in terms of what they are charged to deliver. And what's important is what I call the intermediaries. So we have the folks on our end, you have the folks on your end who are helping to translate those imperatives from both sides. And if they can find that sort of synergy, and then I say the center of this continuum are the students. And what they are saying both verbally and non-verbally in terms of their actions that demonstrate the need and the gap that there is to fill. And so if we have those people in the middle, probably a lot of the folks in the room here, understanding the imperatives on both sides, academic and business, saying how can we find what the imperative is for us and the gap is for us, and then marry that with the needs for the students and the community writ large. That's the secret sauce. And I think, as Tyler said, that marriage is really so pivotal to understanding and communication that actually leads to the perseverance that you mentioned earlier, the sticking with this so that we can deliver those results that we both need to be successful.
So as you both said, I mean, you learn over time, right? It doesn't all start out perfectly, and there are bumps in the road, and it's staying power, right? And the power. What, for both of you, share with the audience, from both of your perspectives, if you were talking to educators about how they should engage employers, give them one word of advice, and then for you, if you were talking sorry.
Our employers too.
Yeah. You got me.
We got you.
Okay,
We're good.
Yeah, that's right.
You got me coffee this morning, so I'm good. So, would you like me to start? Sure. So, I want to add, I think it would be remiss if we didn't add the element of sort of, we're all people, right? And if we start from that standpoint, what I love about the superintendent is I've heard her story. I know that she is a Oakland Unified sort of raised and cultivated leader who's come back and delivered to her community. My story is similar, slightly different. I was educated in the Atlanta public school system, but I was born at the public hospital in Atlanta. And so I have a similar sort of commitment to our community. And that's why I serve in the system that I do in Oakland. And so I think when we find those sort of whys, that's really important for us to try to come back to, because there is messiness. And I don't think it's any secret, Oakland and other districts around the state and the country have had some really challenging times with respect to labor, with respect to cost of continuing to support the demands of the system. Similarly, the healthcare system goes through those same struggles. And in times like that, we often sort of lose kind of why we all got into this space. And we get a little bit frustrated because we want to do more than the resources seem to be able to allow. And I think if we just kind of, we have to get through those noisy periods. Part of getting through them is supporting one another. What we did during the strike in Oakland was we talked to our families that are in workforce and said, how many of you have students who are in Oakland Unified? And in fact, I have a kid who's in kindergarten in Oakland Unified, go OUSD. But we said, how can we support the families during that time to say, you know, if your kid could come to our site and then we could do a day of showing them health, you know, how to enter the field of healthcare. Some of them have parents who work there, so they know a little bit, but let's try to do that to cover each other's back. And I think the school system does that for us as well, certainly in preparing students to be able to absorb what we need in order to be able to discharge our mission for the community. So just working through those things, recognizing that this is hard work, at times a struggle, we can't kind of wall off. We really, that's when more so than otherwise, we have to really try to find ways to support one another so that we don't lose the faith, as it will, and we try to continue to press forward because the community needs us and the students need that.
I would just add, I think the importance is for all of the adults to really stay focused on listening to the students, because the students really provide the data, so to speak, around what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong. And as easy as that is to say, as adults, we get caught up in our own mess. We get caught up in our own theories of action and our dogmatic beliefs about how things should be to get results. And that even gets calcified even more when you have different systems working together. This is what equity should look like. This is what transformation should look like. And then sometimes unintentionally listening to the students who are saying, well, that just ain't working, you know? And so really making sure that we're really focused on like what experiences are working for students. Okay, how can we kind of exponentially increase that? For other kids, because that's where the system transformation comes from. So it's so important, and I think in some ways, in terms of from a school system, really making sure that we're working with employers like our partner here that share that value of students first and being willing to roll up their sleeves and focus on the students, listen to them in terms of what's working. So I think that's crucial, because all of this is really about a do different of education. I don't think anybody here, we're interested in trying to replicate things that aren't working for so many students, and in particular, students of color. So that listening piece of students that is the crux of what cannot be lost.
So there's so much that you're sharing that I'm sure is raising a lot of questions and having people in the room think. So what I'm going to ask you all to do is we're going to bring up more of the Oakland team and the Oakland story, and I'm going to keep friends here, but want you all to begin to think about, are there questions that you want to ask? We want this to be more interactive. You all have, I think, cards like this on your table. So as things come to mind, jot it down. And we're going to collect it in two places. Renita's going to collect them, and Dawn is going to collect them over here, and then we'll have time for Q&A a little bit later. Want to just say this is such a shining example, right? And I have to say, we have so many wonderful ways to continue to inspire employers to get into the action, right? So we also want everybody to know, and I'm saying this here because you're not going to be here tonight, but we are, the Alameda Health System will be one of the recipients of our Employer Champion Awards tonight.
Thank you.
And we are thrilled to be able to honor their work tonight. So the other thing that happens is this takes resources, doesn't it?
Yes.
Right? So this was a wonderful partnership with philanthropy and public dollars, but there was also a lot of action that happened in Oakland itself. So I'm going to bring up two leaders of that work, Dr. Gary Yee and Preston Thomas, who is the high school network superintendent. Gary Yee. Gary Yee, I think, has sat in every seat in education that you can possibly sit in.
I think so.
And Preston, going way back to when this all started, was the principal of one of the best Link Learning high schools in the state. So we are delighted to have you both here and joining this conversation. And I want you all to help people understand, and Kyla, join in, what Measure N is and how that became a reality in Oakland. And Gary, this leads builds on a lot of work that you did, right? And a belief in a community to take the right step, right? And so I want to ask you guys to, people don't know what Measure N is and how you made all that possible.
Well, is my mic okay? Okay.
It is.
Great. Well, thank you, Anne, for setting this up and for inviting me. Measure N is a parcel tax. Many of you know me as a K-12 person, but you might also not know that I've been on the Oakland School Board from 2002 to 2013. And during that time, we experienced the state takeover of our district for lack of resources. And we also went through in 2008, as you all did, the Great Recession. And at the same time, though, I was blessed to have met Anne and Linda Collins of Career Ladders. And we began exploring things around dual enrollment, multiple pathways, and then ultimately this strange thing called linked learning. And I became a true believer through the work of Casson and the CPAs that were in our district, and Preston School Life Academy and Anya Gerholt, I saw in the audience here at Skyline High School. They were both early CPA awardees. And so I said, this is really great, but how do we, because it's supporting and redefining equity for our school district. But these were two small projects. How do we go to scale? And especially when there's no resources. And so my colleague on the board, David Kakashiba, who happens to be one of your first champions, linked learning champions, he and I, mainly him, concocted this idea about what if we had a parcel tax and put it out there to the community and said to the community, we are changing the direction of high schools and what it means to be a public school system, not to prepare kids just for college, because we already had A to G in place, but for college, career, and community. How could we do that? And I said, well, there's this thing called linked learning out there. How about if we do a parcel tax, not for the whole district, and not just to put money on a project, but how about if we focus a parcel tax on an emerging high school transformation, and we ensured that there was money in place for, 10 years to support just that initiative. And so we crafted that parcel tax, and people said 66 2/3% will never get it passed. And we said, we've got to try, because this is life and death for our community. So with the support of our community, we put a parcel tax on the ballot, and we got 75% of the vote. It was for $125 a year per parcel for 10 years. And it comes out to $12 million for our district a year, or $850 per student per year for our high schools, devoted strictly to the implementation. Now, we couldn't put linked learning in our ballot initiative because it was, I think, copywritten. So we simply put in, so we put in the 4 elements. We put in the 4 elements, and we shaped it around that. And the result is we're in our 4th year of linked learning, so we have 6 years to go. And the results are what Preston, and we turned the money basically over to the district and said, spend it in the ways that will promote equity at scale, or linked learning. And so over the years with continuous improvement, that's where we're going, and I couldn't be more excited. So you probably want to know, I mean, I did this mostly as a citizen and as a school board member, and I'm not sure how many school board members actually come to things like linked learning conferences. So if you don't mind, I'm going to look into the TV camera and ask, are there any school board members in the room? Would you please stand up?
All right.
To me, the parcel tax is the community's endorsement that this is the right direction to go. And in 6 more years, we'll put it up for another election, and we'll say, community, do you think we're going in the right direction? And I think there's nothing better as an endorsement than something like that.
Thank you, Gary.
So that's Measure N.
It is an incredible story of what happened. And Preston, add a little bit of life to that, because I know Gary always talks about this, but he didn't. Who was knocking on the doors in the community, right, to get the parcel tax passed, to get the community involved, right? Preston, join in and also share with who really made that happen, in addition to the adults in the room, right? And then help us understand, because you had to begin implementing against that. So how does it fit with the larger context of California? Heard California, the partnership academies know there seems some sense that they're dueling, Link Learning, California, partnership academies, which couldn't be further from the truth. So how are you made this real? You helped make this real. Help people understand how you did that.
Yeah, it's good to walk down that road with Gary. It's funny, he's one of the school board members that would just show up in your school site and he'd be like, hey, show me what's going on in the school.
No, I checked it with the superintendent first.
No, he didn't.
I want to actually start by going to my roots in starting at Fremont High School. As a science teacher, and this kind of goes to the secret sauce of Link Learning, I believe. I sat in isolation in my classroom, and I really loved science, but I wasn't connected to other adults. And when I met with the science department, we would talk about things in science, but we weren't actually talking about kids. It wasn't until I got out of my classroom that I started interacting with the English teacher, the social studies teacher, that we realized that we had this vibrant conversation around kids, kid-centered the whole time. And we started realizing the stories that were behind kids. And then when we started, actually had my kids at Highland, an Oakland Children's Hospital, I was realizing they were connecting with these adults in different ways than they were with their teachers, that we were starting to create like a wraparound supports around these students. It was a community of adults, the village, that were raising children. And one of the things that has been my biggest frustration, being I'm the district now, I'm part of the district, but still a teacher at heart, is that we went through initiative after initiative and it would change every 2 years. And when we looked down into the community and we saw where the results were happening, they were happening in the California Partnership Academies, where you had teams of teachers that were together, and this is pre-Link Learning. They were getting amazing outcomes for kids. Graduation rates were 15 to 20% higher in those pathways within schools. And one of the things that I think is just beautiful about Measure N, it's both district and charter schools as well get access to the money, but it's the same standard. It's the roadmap to how you create a full-service quality school for children. And so it has these 4 elements that I think are absolutely fantastic. And it was actually the community, when they were looking with their own children and they were saying, so who was walking the streets, pounding on doors, they were saying, we want more experiences like this for our kids. And so they're the ones that raise the funding, and it has kept us true to that vision. I mean, it is, I think Gary came in as superintendent for a year, and during that time, Link Learning launched, but we've had 2 superintendents since then and lots of different organizational structures. But the one thing that has been true has been the Link Learning model in high school. And our graduation rates have increased by about 13% in the last 3 years, and it's just been an amazing, And I think the true school transformation, you're going to hear from Oakland High in a second, but they are doing an amazing job, and they're just applying the principles across the entire school and truly becoming a transformational model for our district.
Yeah, you were mentioned community partners and student partners. I still remember, Preston, going to a meeting at Life Academy, and Mrs. Mendoza from the Oakland Community Organization stands up, and she says, this is great for us at Life Academy, what's happening, but is this going to happen for all of our children? She said that to me, and I said, yes, if we do this, it will be for every child. And that vision is my North Star, that Mrs. Mendoza asked me, and I put myself on the line, and I said, when we pass this, this will be for every child. And that's the vision, and I'm glad you sent me here because I'm looking at for equity at scale.
Exactly.
That's what scale means.
That's
but
absolutely for
we had
every
2
child.
particular community partners, Oakland Community Organizations, which is a PICO, and East Bay Asian Youth Center, who were both stepped up at the very beginning And we had a community partner, Go Public Schools. And so I want to acknowledge all three of them. And there's a foundation called the Irvine Foundation, and they provided some support too during that period of time. But
yes, we've heard of that one. I think I know that one. So Gary, I want to bring up three others to join this conversation, because the reality is we're transforming the education on a daily basis for young people, right? So they represent probably the most powerful daily instantiation of linked learning for all of us, right? So want to welcome up three incredibly inspiring leaders from Oakland High School. So first, Mateen Abdel Kawi, the principal of Oakland High School. Woo! Tiffany Holliday, who is a coach for the College and Career Pathways.
Welcome to the Fireside Chat.
And Tatiana Newman-Wade, who's the Work-Based Learning Liaison for Oakland Unified School District. So as you guys get seated, I'm going to mention something, and anybody can speak to this, because I know you all can. But I spend, and I try to spend as much time as I can at Oakland High School, because it's amazing, that I have never been in a school where consistently every single young person says, I feel seen here. And those are their words. I feel seen. It's palpable. Talk about how you have created that sense. And I think it starts with students at the center. But, you know, Mateen, start talking about what it is that you've done in terms of the culture and the movement in the school.
Sure. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about Oakland High. It's always a fun place to talk about. I think we do a lot of things to help make sure that all of our students are seen and heard. I remember standing outside of my office one day. There were a group of students standing out. It was during lunchtime. You know, you do your lunchtime supervision. And I heard a couple of students say, you know, I've been sitting in the same class for almost 6 weeks now, and I don't even think the teacher knows my name. This is when I first got there. Now, you know, so I pulled her to the side, and a really shy young lady was really kind of blown away that, you know, someone could be in a classroom, in the community for so long and not be seen. And this is when I first got there, and I was still trying to unpack what Oakland High was about and what its values were and where we were headed. And come to find out that there were some students who were seen very well and some students not as well. And the correlation had a lot to do with those that were in pathways, those who were connected to linked learning, and those who weren't. And Oakland High has had pathways for 20 plus years. And at that point, maybe a third of our students were in pathways. And now 100% of our students are in pathways. And I think what you experienced since you've been there is that those students are seen because they're in pathways. They're connected to a group of teachers, a pod of support that helps them be seen throughout their day and throughout their experiences at Oakland High. And there's a lot of different structural things that we put in place to help students be seen. In addition to wall-to-wall pathways, I think the pod of support that we have for each pathway. So every pathway that we have has an assistant principal, a counselor, a guidance counselor, and a case manager assigned to them. And they're all housed in one area. So anytime a student or a family member needs support or needs to engage someone in that community, there's a pod of support there for them to help them get the resources that they need.
Can I just lift up? I mean,
yeah,
I think one of the things that we didn't realize when we were rolling out the transformation across the entire district was that you would actually have to change the structure of the way you've organized school. And Mateen's given you kind of an example of like, they didn't just stay in their traditional roles of like counselors being A through H and all that. They started reorganizing the school to wrap around the pathway rather than letting pathways sit and work in isolation of the entire school. And so like, I just like, and I just wanted like the ecosystem now that exists in Oakland, Dr. D'Alessandro is here from Skyline, which is now starting to reorganize its school around that. So there's this ecosystem of learning that's happening across the city that's super powerful. And Mateen figured that out on his own at his site. Like that wasn't a district directive. He was just noticing the kids and kind of their story and trying to align the system to support them.
And so we also, you know, part of what we're talking about, what's happening in the schools, right? But part of the power of all of this is the ability, right, that you have unleashed, right, to allow young people to learn outside of the classroom, which we all think is equally important. So I wanted to just check in with you speak about the employer partners and how you're making that work, because we all know, we absolutely know that that's not easy to do, and to create those partnerships and to have that be working for both sides of the team, right? So.
So we partner with various partners, and a lot of our health-based partnerships, it's another way that also young people are able to be heard and able to learn more about their options for future careers. We make sure that we deepen our relationships with our partners, so it's not just a one-time thing, right? It's not just, we know that at Highland Hospital, they offer the HEAL program, which is an internship program, and so it's not just a flyer on the wall that says you can do this internship. They're willing to come into the classroom, talk more about the experience. In addition to that, take our 10th grade class to Highland Hospital, learn more about what they do, and engage in discussion around that. That happens with other health-based partners as well. Mentoring in medicine and science also offer paid internships for our students. In addition to that, they have peer education programs where they come into our classrooms and they're talking about different health topics, but not just sharing the information, actually having engaging discussion with young people, which is very important because they need to understand how is it important in their own lives currently, and how is it going to apply to them in their future.
So, Tiffany, I want you to speak a little bit. You can speak about whatever you want in this conversation, because I know you have so much to offer. But you know, one of the things is this doesn't just happen overnight, right? I mean, there's a lot of professional development. There's a lot of coaching, right? I think Preston once said about Mateen, this is the man who knows when to go fast and when to go slow. And that is part of what I think the district collectively has done, is really knowing how to calibrate that. How do you support as a coach, the work for everybody to sort of know how to move forward?
It's definitely a big task, but focusing on various elements of development, so team development within the pathway, overall pathway development, while considering all the elements of linked learning. Our Public Health Academy team, they definitely did a lot of great work with Tatiana and building these partnerships and these opportunities for students, but the teaching team also knew that in order to see greater outcomes for their students, they needed to do things differently in their classroom as well. And it took some time, but over the course of a few years, got to the point where they were ready to embrace more project-based learning and integrated curriculum, bringing in health themes into their own personal curriculum as well. So last year, most of the team invested a huge amount of time in some intense professional development around project-based learning, and the results have been really amazing for students. And they saw this as a way to increase students, or help students be seen and heard in the community through the elements of like student voice and choice and public exhibition when it comes to their curricular projects. A couple of examples of those was during a unit where they read The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, they brought a debate to UC Berkeley's School of Public Health, had the debate there and got to interact with current students there. And then one that we're really proud of and talk about often is this book that students published called Crossing Medical Boundaries, that included narrative analysis of their own family and cultural and religious medical practices, along with original student artwork that they put together for the Alameda County Public Health Department. And then that department has put that resource into the hands of medical professionals, doctors and nurses and others throughout the county for them to reference, to help them understand their patients more around just different approaches to medicine within our community.
You know, I wanted to, Tatiana and Tiffany both mentioned the public health perspective, and I just wanted to tip a hat to Delvecchio and the work of your hospital system, because Dr. Garrick, who was one of your people who was on the show, really pointed out the urgency of the front loading of health, which is essentially public health. And even though most of our kids, I believe, who go into a health academy believe they're going to be thinking doctors and nurses, the whole notion of doing action research, of doing public health analysis, looking at social determinants, that's all front-loaded into the high school program, especially at Oakland High School, because you have both the clinical and the public health side, and I'm just want to congratulate you for that.
Yeah, can I mean, I totally agree with that. I was like, I need to take some notes, like, I don't forget some of this stuff, but I wanted to highlight those 2 points as well. I feel like one of the sort of secret sauce to this that we can probably do a lot more of is just sort of in harnessing the power of the students to make sure that sort of this I'll call the return on investment, and it's talking to you all about, talking to employers about this, is that you can actually accelerate the work that you're doing. So yes, it's experiential learning. Yes, it's a way to advance equity by showing students more the different types of careers that are available in healthcare that you don't typically know about if you don't come from backgrounds where this is a part of the DNA or just a natural sort of walk of life for you. So that's the beauty on that side. But on the other side is this upstream work. Like really, I mean, you think about it, my daughter's only 5 now, but she's already shaming me into doing stuff that I feel like I should be doing as a parent, because you want to be the person that your kid thinks you is, right? You are, rather. But when we arm these kids with knowledge about like how to take care of yourself, how to be accountable for your own health, when they go back into their communities and they're talking to their parents about maybe stopping smoking or limiting alcohol intake or other sorts of things, they have more power and capacity and station than sometimes the healthcare workers do. And they bring that message back to the community, because still in our areas, and some of the disconnect to the success of the work we do is that there is a sense of other when we, in our communities, of when they come into the space of healthcare. So they know that people have chosen to serve their community, but if they don't feel like you walk that life, it's a bit of a disconnect. So the students bring to us, look, you keep talking to this person about like getting healthy fruits and vegetables. Do you know there's not a grocery store within 10 miles of where they live, and that there's not even a bus stop unless they have to walk like, 5 or 6 blocks to actually do that? So. And by the way, in that 5 or 6 blocks, they pass 2 fast food restaurants, right? Stories you've already heard. And so it's kind of bringing a sense of reality on both sides that actually enhance what we do. This is not a soft project of like, oh, isn't it nice of what we do? This is actually bringing value to the students, to the education environment, and to the workforce that we just have to do more of. And I'm sitting here thinking, Jessica's going to regret inviting me to this, because we got to figure out ways to harness this even more, and I look forward to doing more of that with you.
So we have a panel of just incredible leaders here, and I hope people have questions. So I'm gonna stop trying to be the person asking questions and get some input from the audience. So Renita and Don, do you have questions? Are you collecting stuff from folks as we go? And they're going to sort of sift through and ask some questions of the group. Tell us when you're ready to go. Don, you ready? Okay.
All ready to go here. So the first question we have is, you all have talked about how you brought together the adults through this process, and then through some informal mechanisms have been able to get feedback from students. But the question is, what formal system do you use to, quote, listen to students as you build your linked learning approach in the district?
Want it, Kyla? Team? Preston?
Sure. I think there's a lot more informal ways that we do it, and I guess there are a few formal ways as well. So one of the things that we do, and we do fairly consistently, is we have monthly staff meetings. And what we do at the beginning of the meetings, and we've done this for this school year, is to bring in a group of students to hear from them. And so in the month between meetings, we identify the group of students that we want to listen to. We do a focus group with them, and we unpack what it is what their experience at Oakland High is. And then at the staff meeting the following month, then they get to present out what it is that they're feeling, what they're experiencing, what their experience is at Oakland High. And it gives us an opportunity to listen to them without the expectation that it's a professional development, that it's an opportunity to take copious notes and go ahead and begin to change things instantly, immediately. What it is, it's an opportunity to hear from a population of students that you often don't get to hear from directly. So we've had students from we have a growing newcomer population at our school, and they're in a pathway, but they're in like a pre-pathway. So their experience is now, like, we want them to obviously learn the academic skills they need to be successful in the linked learning pathway, so they have a pre-pathway experience. But their transition into this country, into Oakland and into Oakland High is not an easy one. And although they're closely connected to some of our teachers, all of our teachers need to be aware of their experience and what's happening with them at Oakland High. So our first student focus group were students of our RISE Academy, for us to all learn from them. We had African-American male students do a similar presentation. We had students from our Pride community also do a similar presentation. And all of these are opportunities for us to hear from them, understand what their experience is at Oakland High, and for us to make changes and put supports in place to help them be more successful.
I would add on for our side, and I'm sure I don't know all the different mechanisms we use to formally hear from students, but we have, as was mentioned here, we have about 7 different programs. HILL is one of our largest ones, and it's our largest partnership with OUSC, where about 88 to 89% of the students are in that program. But we have programs for students from middle school all the way through medical school, actually, who have different types of experiential linked learning type of opportunities with us. And one of the things that the team allows for me to do, so I have greater knowledge of this, is at the beginning of many of our cohorts, I get the opportunity to come and kind of share a little bit of my story and my background to the students, but also to hear from them and hear about their stories and what they're hoping to get out of these programs, what their life aspirations are, and how we can support them. We also have graduations at the end of many of these cohorts where then those students get to talk about what their experience has been, what they have learned. Sometimes many of them go away saying, I've learned that I don't want to do this. And that's okay, because a lot of learning what you want to do is figuring out what you don't want to do. But having that experience allows you to do that with greater clarity, with greater intelligence. And so those are just 2 of the ways in which we do that. But as I mentioned, I'm sure there are others that I just either don't participate in directly or aren't familiar with.
Well,
we also have on an annual basis opportunities for students to come together, high school students to come together. I think someone spoke to this earlier, and just kind of share their internship experiences. We have Emiliano, who's in the front. You can give a raise the roof. And he and his team organizes this. But the great thing about it is an opportunity to listen to students and the impact of that internship experience on their own growth. And to really hear from them what they've learned. A lot of times our employers come as well. And it's just an opportunity, again, to get from them what's working. One of the times that I've been able to go, you really hear from students not only the experience itself, but the importance of the mentorship that goes along with the internship experience that really makes a difference for kids. So I think having those as they're ritualized, and that is a part of what we do as a system, so that we get the information as the school district, so to speak, on what we need to do differently to utilize our resources better, how we need to support schools better. When we're hearing from school to school, I think where we're still struggling is there's a lot still that schools are doing to kind of come up and do a lot of recruiting. So when we hear from our students coming together, it helps us to think about, how we improve our infrastructure so that all schools have better internship opportunities for kids.
Well, Kyla mentioned that in Oakland we have hella community engagement. So as part of our parcel tax, we actually have a 5-member commission, of which I've been a part, and David Kakashiva has been the president for 3 years. And we actually go to every school and every academy every year. We meet twice a month for a couple of 3 hours, so this is very serious business. And we go to a school, and the school appoints some students to speak, but we don't give them the questions ahead of time. And so it's really probing to see that the experience is what the staff says it is. We verify with direct experience. So sometimes we have follow-up meetings. This is very serious community involvement, community engagement, but that's how the commission assures that students are heard.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Chris.
I'll go real quick.
Oh, cool.
Mateen hit on focus groups. Focus groups are fantastic. We've done them for Asian Pacific Islander students at schools that were disproportionately not succeeding in the school. They usually know what the system needs to do to support them. You just need to listen to them and then provide that service that they're asking for. So we've done that. The other thing is when we go out into school sites and we're looking at their linked learning pathway, we say, who are your pathway students? And then we select a random sampling of those kids and listen to them about their experience. And they're like, I didn't know I was in that pathway. And it's like, okay, there's the opportunity for a conversation.
Exactly.
Because it's not a got ya. It's usually that the system, they don't know where they fit within that system. And we're growing and developing and continuously improving. And the third thing is, a lot of the dashboards when I got in the district, the student data was actually aggregated into these big like bar charts and things like that. We've rearranged all of our dashboards across to Oakland by the pathway. So if a pathway team wants to look up and find out like what kids are off track for graduation, they can drill down to an individual grade level and they could track individual students to find out how they're performing on all kinds of metrics because all of our data systems are aligned to the pathway, and that increases the level of conversation that's at the kid level that allows them to be seen.
Okay, Renita, I just want to make sure we're bringing in some other, hopefully.
Sure. So, Son, you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
So the question it's a practical question about the health internships. How do you handle the liability issues and who pays for it? Is it Measure N or other funding sources?
Is that a question for me?
Probably, but
Just leave it to general counsel.
Whoever can answer.
there's got to be a lawyer in the room.
Yeah, I know, right? Where's my lawyer when I need him? Honestly, I could make up something, but that wouldn't give you any justice. I'd be happy to, Jessica Pitt is here, Joseph Peters, and others on our team could probably tell you more about how that's handled on a very practical basis, because I'm sure they deal with a lot of those things. I do not. I just trust that they're being taken care of.
And you know what? There's going to be a session this afternoon, a breakout that Rebecca is leading, which is really the lessons learned from the Oakland Health Partnership. And there's this amazing report about it. So we will make this accessible to folks. So I'm sure some of those really specific answers can also be, I'm trying to cover you, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, it's all good.
Can be answered.
I've learned
there.
not to lie as much because I have to remember the lie, but I'd be happy to get the information for whoever needs that. So thank you for the question.
But they're thorny issues, right?
I'm sure they are.
They're
Yes.
thorny issues that people are working out. Don?
Okay, this is sort of a combination question, but how difficult was the transition in changing your school's ecosystem? And related, what tips or advice do you have for other schools who are making that transition? And then more specifically, how do you keep cohorts of teachers together over multiple years to move pathways forward?
Oh, my team.
Really?
Or teachers. Boom, throw it all out there. What you got?
Solve it all, Matisse.
Yeah. So this is what I did. No, just kidding. That's a very complex question, and you can have a whole session on that alone. I think a couple of guiding principles that support us in the work that we do is trust. We have some amazing teachers, many of them that are here today are with us now, that you really have to understand their expertise and their ability to do the work and just need the support and resources to do it. So for example, one of the first things I tried to do there when I got there was to put in place an A-period, A-B block schedule. Who's laughing at me? and failed miserably. failed miserably in my efforts to convey to our staff the value and importance of this schedule. And all of you who are connected to these types of schedules know the additional opportunities and resources it provides for young people. So in my mind and in my heart, I knew it was the right thing to do. I was a new principal at the school. I said, this is where we're headed. I was going alone. And it wasn't until our directors, each one of our pathways has a director, until they went on to a conference themselves and learned about it, were we able to actually move the conversation forward. And they became the leaders and the voice for the new period, the new eight-period AB block schedule. They became the spokespersons for it. They became the ones that advocated for it and supported it, and eventually helped us get the number of votes we needed to pass it at our school. But it had more to do with me stepping back and allowing those who had better connections with both the teachers and the students to lead the conversation and move it forward. There were a lot of other parts to your question that I actually don't remember.
Anyone want to add anything?
Ecosystem. I just even want to build. Like when they had the vote, it was lost by like 2 votes or something like that. And it was like, then it wasn't like they gave up on the conversation. They still went back, they had a dialogue, and finally made a decision to move as a whole school to the 8-period block. And this is where, like, I think actually a key point in that question is, how many school districts are still at the high school level aligned around a 6-period day? Like, could you just like, yeah, okay. So one of the big challenges that we notice is that when you're trying to put pathways together, and you want to have like 4 classes that are together, and then you get like the world language requirement, the PE requirement, it starts to cut out space for that flexibility within the schedule to be able to do the things that you asked for, right? And so one of the things that I was really excited about, and Mateen's not talking about like kind of the outcomes that Oakland High has had for its students, but has really eliminated disproportionality around graduation rates for African American and Latino students within the school. And a lot of that is about building in those support structures, but building in collaboration time, building in credit recovery opportunities for students that fall off track so you don't pull them out of the pathway classes and deny them access to the internship opportunities that are going to create kind of that identity that they're developing. So I would say like there's a lot to that question, a ton, but having the patience and having a strategy around building out your structures within the school is really critical. And our schools aren't necessarily designed to always support kids.
So I'm going to do one more question, and then I'm going to ask Kyla if she has a closing sort of remark. You started the panel with me, you get to close it. Renita, do you have a question? Great.
I do. So this is from a teen, and it kind of follows on the last one. How has Oakland High School intentionally trained assistant principals and counselors around the linked learning approach, and how has this structure made teachers' work more sustainable?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the whole question.
Okay. So how has Oakland High School intentionally trained assistant principals and counselors around the linked learning approach, and how has this influenced teachers and their work and made it more sustainable?
Sure, I'll take the first part, then Tiffany and Tatiana can chime in. One of the things that helps our system become aware of linked learning and all the elements in it is actually our master schedule. So each pathway, all the teachers within that pathway have a common prep period. And there's expectation that every week, ideally, but at least every other week, that the teachers in that pathway meet to talk about a number of things, whether it's curriculum, upcoming work-based learning opportunities, student of concern protocols. There are a number of things that happen during those PLCs. The pod of support, the assistant principal, the counselor, and the case manager are part of those meetings as well. So Tiffany often supports the creation of those agendas, co-leads those meetings, and as a result of that, everyone in that system becomes aware of all the elements of the linked learning elements within that particular pathway. We also send everyone as often as we can, and this is one of the beauties of Measure In. There is funding available to send our teams to different professional development opportunities throughout the area and throughout the state. And I think another thing that we do, some more than others within our system, is visiting other schools as well. So they have the opportunities to see what other schools are doing that are linked learning schools that are involved in this work. They get to learn from them as well.
And I'll add in the extreme importance of our Pathway Director team that meets formally once a month, but communicates often informally as well, or twice a month. So we come together, and there's lots of things that need to get figured out school-wide in order for wall-to-wall pathways to work, and we can't have individual decisions or policies in individual pathways, because then there's competition and disconnect. And so what we do with that team is, when there's an issue that we feel like it's something that needs to be explored school-wide, that we address or we come up with a policy or a practice that we can implement across all pathways. So for example, our pathway placement and balancing process, so that all of our pathways demographics reflect those of the larger school, or policy around what to do when a student wants to transfer pathways and things like that. So we have discussion and exploration within that team, develop a strategy or a practice, and then share that with the assistant principals and the counselors, being like, this is the way we're gonna do it, this is what we've agreed to, and now it's your job to help us implement it and uphold it. And that's been a key piece as well.
I think it's also super helpful that when you hire new people into the system, that they're hired into a linked learning wall-to-wall pathway system, right? So I think there's a clear distinction between those who come to the school, that's all they know, as opposed to those who have been there for a longer period of time, and there's an adjustment period for them to get up to speed with the new systems that are in place.
And there's also, I think for a larger district where there is high turnover, just going back to the turnover question, I just want to shout out to Tiffany and the coaches. We have a core which holds the culture of linked learning across the district, emphasizing equity, access, and all the other things. So it's very easy for the, let's say, the pathways to become competitive with each other, lifting up, having winners and losers, and it's important for the district to hold the equity lens for the entire district, for every subgroup, for the whole system. And so I just want to shout out to Tiffany and her and Preston and your team for making that always the priority.
And in closing, would you, that's obviously the rallying cry for your leadership at the district and all the partnerships that you have developed. So any final words?
Yeah, just two final words. One, I think Preston mentioned before just the increase, about 13% over the last 3 years, but I also want to underscore that there's been an increase in our students who are the most away from success. So we've had success in terms of more special needs students that have been graduating, more English language learners and newcomers that have been graduating, Latino students and African Americans. And so to me, because in Oakland we've done many things where we've seen as an aggregate, kids are getting better, but we've still really struggled in terms of seeing, is this particular initiative or program or investment really making the difference for kids of color? And so that's the question to me that all of our systems should be wrestling with, because if it's not making a difference to really close the opportunity gap, we need to stop and think, is it something we should still be doing? And what we're seeing with this is that over many years, we are seeing more of our kids that are actually graduating. The last point that I want to make is, to me, really this is around, we know the way, Anne talked about this in the beginning, that the traditional approach to high school, it's really not working for any kid, but it certainly isn't working for kids that really need more from the system in order to actually be productive when they're outside. And so this really is a way of re-envisioning high school, but my push, and we've talked about this, is it really then trickles down to middle and to elementary school. So for us to really begin to think about, how do middle schools change? Because a lot of what we're struggling with is making sure, even by the time kids get into 9th grade, that we don't have to do as much coaching to get them into pathways. If they come into ninth grade kind of ready to take on this more work-based learning experience. So there are implications for what we need to do differently in middle school and even down to elementary schools. I mean, there's one thing to have kids go to field trips. It's another thing for field trips as a 5-year-old and a 6-year-old for them to leave elementary already having their mind swirling about what I could be. Particularly if they don't necessarily grow up where that necessarily is happening in the home. So I feel like in many ways we're really getting started. Lots of systems questions. Back to 8-period day, we've been talking about, well, we need to be thinking about what is that cost as a system, right? And if that is something that we know we need to prioritize so all high schools have the conditions to create this wonderful environment, then we need to sacrifice other things to make that happen. So it's just constant learning, constant thinking about what are the systems that we need to create for the wonderful ideas to actually flourish, to then have impacts for the students that we're all trying to serve. So we just appreciate the opportunity for sharing. Thank you.
I can't think of a better concluding set of remarks. So can you help join me in thanking this incredible panel for sharing the story of Oakland?